Hi, Black Cat Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an fantasy drama movie named A Cure for Wellness. A person called Morris is staying at his office until late. He begins to feel pain in his chest. When the pain gets worse, Morris goes to get a drink of water. Unfortunately, the pain intensifies and he has a heart attack. He collapses on the floor and passes away. We encounter a man named Mr. Lockhart while traveling on a train to work. He seems very absorbed in his job and comes across as impolite and inconsiderate towards others. Later, Lockhart attends a meeting with his superiors, including Hank Green, Hollis, and Wilson. They discuss a message they received from their company's CEO, Roland Pembroke, who was expected to be away for 2 weeks at a spa in the Swiss Alps but hasn't returned as planned. The message suggests that Pembroke may have experienced some kind of mental breakdown. During the meeting, Green presents Lockhart with an illegal document that Lockhart had submitted, which is now being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Lockhart is given an order to locate and bring Pembroke back unless he wants to face the consequences for his actions. In a memory, we witness Lockhart visiting his mother at a retirement home. She has a little music box with a ballerina inside, and she tells him that the ballerina is dreaming, but she doesn't realize she's in a dream. Sadly, Lockhart's mother passes away and is cremated before he leaves, but he keeps the ballerina as a memento. After reaching Switzerland, Lockhart hitches a ride with a taxi driver named Enrico. While they are driving up the hill towards the spa, a local resident throws a beverage at the car. Enrico explains that the villagers have a long-standing feud with the people residing on the hill. He recounts a tale about a baron who aimed to preserve his family lineage by marrying his own sister. When the baron discovered his sister was unable to bear children, he started conducting experiments on the villagers. This eventually led to a rebellion, and the villagers retaliated by burning the baron's sister alive. When Lockhart reaches the spa, he discovers that visiting hours have just ended. Consequently, Lockhart departs with Enrico and asks him to take him to a hotel so he can make a phone call since there is no mobile service on the hill. In another memory, we witness a young Lockhart sitting in a car with his father. It's a rainy day, and as they drive over a bridge, they hear on the radio that stocks have crashed and many jobs have been lost. His father pulls the car over and walks to the edge of the bridge. Lockhart watches in shock as his father jumps off the bridge, leaving him alone in the car. While en route to the hotel, a deer suddenly emerges from the woods and darts onto the road. Enrico unintentionally collides with the deer, resulting in the deer getting stuck in the windshield. The impact causes the car to veer off the road and collide into a ditch. 3 days later, Lockhart regains consciousness in a room at the spa. He encounters the spa's director, Dr. Heinrich Vollmer, who informs him that he suffered a leg fracture due to the car accident. Vollmer mentions that he has already informed Green about the incident. Vollmer suggests that Lockhart should make use of the spa's treatments during his stay. Additionally, when he takes a sip of water, he discovers a parasitic creature floating in the glass. However, he locates Pembroke in the bathhouse, where Pembroke is enjoying a swim. Lockhart insists that Pembroke should accompany him back home. Despite Lockhart's concerns, Pembroke seems perfectly fine and shows no interest in leaving. Lockhart encounters 3 patients named Frank Hill, Ron Nair, and Victoria Watkins during his time at the spa. Watkins, in particular, takes pleasure in solving crossword puzzles. Surprisingly, all 3 patients appear content and satisfied with their treatments at the spa. Later, Lockhart meets Hannah, a young woman who believes she is a unique case. He observes that Hannah, along with several other patients, as well as Vollmer and other staff members, frequently take vitamin droplets from a blue bottle. During his stay at the spa, Lockhart undergoes a treatment involving a water tank. As the tank fills up with water, the attendant responsible for taking care of Lockhart becomes distracted. Unexpectedly, the tank becomes filled with eels, leading Lockhart to experience a state of panic. In the midst of his distress, Lockhart rises up in the tank, and one of the eels pulls off his breathing tube, putting him at risk of drowning. However, Lockhart manages to open the tank and release the water, preventing himself from drowning. When Lockhart brings up the Baron's story to Watkins, she shares some additional details with him. Watkins reveals that the spa was constructed on the site where the Baron's castle once stood before the villagers burned it down. She mentions a disturbing aspect of the story, explaining that the Baron's sister had her baby forcibly removed from her womb and thrown into an underground water source called an aquifer. However, Watkins cryptically adds, "She doesn't know," without providing further clarification or context. In an exchange with Hannah, Lockhart offers her his ballerina figurine in return for a bike ride into town. They ride together and make a stop at a nearby tavern. Lockhart purchases beers for both himself and Hannah. Coincidentally, he runs into Enrico, who miraculously survived the car crash and was provided with a new vehicle, courtesy of the spa's financial assistance. Hannah decides to stay at the tavern to enjoy the music and engage in a solo dance performance in front of the other patrons. Meanwhile, Lockhart discovers a barn where he encounters a mute child who is sketching a depiction of the castle fire. Peter, the child's father, approaches Lockhart. Intrigued by the surroundings, Lockhart initiates a conversation with Peter, asking questions about the spa and its history. Subsequently, Peter attends to a sick cow that is near death. Meanwhile, Lockhart returns to the bar and notices a punk individual dancing alongside Hannah. Lockhart contacts Green, who demands an explanation regarding what transpired between him and Pembroke. Lockhart mentions that Volmer had informed them about the accident, but Green expresses surprise, as he had no knowledge of the incident until Lockhart brought it up. Green then issues a firm directive, instructing Lockhart to bring Pembroke back to New York within the following 24 hours. Concerned for her well-being, Lockhart attempts to intervene and separate the punk from Hannah. Unfortunately, the punk becomes aggressive and attacks Lockhart. Just in the nick of time, Volmer arrives at the scene and rescues Lockhart and Hannah, coming to their aid and offering them a ride. Lockhart experiences a loose tooth that he ultimately decides to extract himself. After pulling out the tooth, he takes it to a staff member who places it in water. Determined to uncover the truth, Lockhart proceeds to search for answers. He stealthily navigates past the staff members and explores different sections of the facility. Along his journey, he discovers a room containing multiple water tanks, within which several patients, including Pembroke, are submerged and appear lifeless. Additionally, Lockhart stumbles upon an underground area that houses a pool used for disposing of dead bodies, which are then consumed by the eels. Shockingly, one of the deceased individuals is Mrs. Watkins. As Lockhart attempts to make his way back to his room, he is apprehended by the caretaker, Volmer, and another staff member. Lockhart brings up his dental concern, but instead of receiving assistance, he is forcefully restrained in a room. To his horror, a drill is forcefully inserted into his front tooth, subjecting him to a highly distressing experience. Lockhart manages to flee from the spa and makes his way into town, intending to report Volmer's unethical experiments to a police officer. However, Volmer and one of his staff members track Lockhart down and arrive at the scene to take him back. Despite Lockhart's efforts to expose the truth, Pembroke unexpectedly appears, seemingly unharmed and supporting Volmer's assertions. Pembroke accuses Lockhart of posing a threat and insists on forcibly returning him to New York. Left with no other options, Lockhart reluctantly agrees to go back with Volmer, realizing the difficult situation he is in. Following further treatments at the spa, Lockhart begins to exhibit behaviors and thought patterns similar to Pembroke's. He becomes convinced that he is unwell and needs to remain at the spa for a cure. However, during a moment of clarity while composing a note to his employers, Lockhart experiences a realization. He reflects on the fact that once a person becomes aware of the truth, it is impossible to unsee or ignore it. While Hannah is in the pool, she unexpectedly starts her first period. The presence of eels near her initially causes alarm, but soon they begin swimming in a perfect circle around her. In the midst of these events, Lockhart, fueled by suspicion, shatters a glass and uses a shard to expose that his leg was never truly broken. Determined to uncover the truth, he bursts out of his room and locates Hannah. However, in her panic state, Hannah reacts with fear and strikes Lockhart in the face as he attempts to offer assistance. Hannah flees and discovers Volmer in a room where he, the staff, and certain patients are having dinner. Lockhart quickly follows and begins to expose Volmer as a deceitful individual, blaming him for the sickness that has afflicted everyone due to the water's mysterious contents, which lead to tooth loss as a side effect. As Lockhart voices his accusations, the patients begin to rise from their seats. Lockhart initially believes they are standing in support of him, but to his dismay, they are actually turning against him, causing him to lose consciousness under the overwhelming pressure of their presence. After regaining consciousness, Lockhart finds himself confined in a chamber where he is unable to move. To his horror, Vollmer subjects him to a distressing procedure in which a tube is forcibly inserted down his throat. Vollmer then administers the eel-filled liquid into Lockhart's body, using it as a means to introduce the vitamins that all the patients are compelled to consume. The eels, acting as filters, extract and process these substances, carrying out Vollmer's questionable treatment method. Lockhart undergoes a dental procedure to repair his teeth, mirroring the transformation experienced by the other patients who remain trapped in the delusion of being unwell. Vollmer organizes a lively party that evening, involving both the patients and staff. As part of the festivities, Vollmer presents Hannah with a new dress for the occasion. In Lockhart's room, however, he begins to regain his clarity of mind. He recollects the conversation he had with Watkins regarding the Baron's history. Curiosity leads him to discover a portrait captured after the devastating fire. Lockhart breaks the portrait and utilizes a glass to magnify a particular individual in the image, a man heavily bandaged. Intriguingly, he finds a note alongside the portrait, bearing the words, "He doesn't know." To his astonishment, Lockhart realizes that the portrait conceals a significant detail. The man is seen holding hands with a little girl, who turns out to be Hannah. Vollmer leads Hannah into a room adjacent to the transfusion wing, where he keeps a portrait of his sister, Hannah's mother. In a horrifying turn of events, Vollmer restrains Hannah on a bed, intending to commit a heinous act of sexual assault. However, Lockhart manages to escape from his room and encounters the caretaker. Engaging in a fierce struggle, Lockhart temporarily blinds the caretaker by releasing steam into his face. Seizing the opportunity, Lockhart delivers a fatal blow to the caretaker, ultimately causing his demise. With determination, Lockhart locates Vollmer and manages to rescue Hannah from his clutches. A fierce confrontation ensues between Lockhart and Vollmer. In a desperate attempt to defeat Vollmer, Lockhart lures him into a trap by dousing the surroundings with flammable fuel. As Vollmer becomes engulfed in flames, he inadvertently sets fire to the surrounding curtains in a frantic attempt to extinguish himself. The spreading fire quickly engulfs the castle, ascending towards its upper levels. Meanwhile, Lockhart strives to free Hannah from the perilous situation. However, Vollmer, still filled with rage, launches an attack on Lockhart. Dragging him closer to the eel pool, Vollmer intends to end Lockhart's life. In a courageous act, Hannah seizes a shovel and delivers a forceful blow to Vollmer's head. The impact causes him to stagger backward and ultimately plummet into the pool, where he becomes the macabre feast for the eels dwelling within. Lockhart and Hannah manage to make their escape just as the patients and staff scatter from the blazing castle. They mount Hannah's bike and swiftly ride away, seeking to put distance between themselves and the horrors they have endured. However, their journey is soon interrupted by the sudden appearance of a car blocking their path. As the car door opens, Lockhart recognizes the familiar faces of Green, Hollis, and Wilson, who demand that he enter the vehicle. Inquiring about Pembroke, Lockhart reveals that Pembroke is no longer present. Lockhart and Hannah decide to ride off into the darkness of the night, leaving the group behind.